Imagine for just a moment that you are 20 years old. You make a paltry $10 an hour, and your parents are going through a tumultuous divorce. Just 2 years ago, your parents and your little 7-year-old sister moved across the country. At that time, you thought your parents' marriage was healthy, and maybe someday you would be able to raise a glass at their 50th wedding anniversary. But now, you have lived with your mom for 6 months, and your dad convinces you to live with him. You have been pulled in every direction but the right one. You barely make it 3 months of living with your dad, who you now realize is a monster. Your mom is loving and caring, and you want to go back to her, but she says you cannot. However, she did say that she's going to help you find a place to live. However, there's only one problem. How in the world can you find a place to live by making a measly $10 an hour? I suppose you can get another job, but you need time to get through college. The question of this moment is, what are you going to do about this? Over the next few minutes, I would like to persuade you that affordable housing is a huge issue in this country, and there is not a quick or easy fix to solve this dilemma. For the last decade plus, I've been living in rooms for rent and roommate situations because it is the only way I have been able to afford a place to live while working service jobs such as cashier or pizza delivery. Many of you watching this speech are college students. Most college students are only able to get low wage jobs because they have not yet developed skills to acquire jobs with better wages. They also cannot work unlimited hours because they need some hours to complete coursework. Therefore, they can only afford housing at the lower end of the cost spectrum. Now that I've introduced the topic of affordable housing, I will break it down and examine 3 major points. Number 1, affordable housing is an issue that is prominent in booming economic times and also those really depressing economic downturns. In 2018, which was a year without COVID and also a year that did not have high inflation, the National Low Income Housing Coalition found that a person working 40 hours a week, making minimum wage, could afford to rent a regular 2-bedroom apartment in exactly 0 counties nationwide. Yes, let me repeat that. 0 counties nationwide. Major point number 2. Why can't we just increase the supply of housing? When a road suffers from high traffic congestion, we simply add more lanes. When the price of gasoline gets too high, our government increases the supply of oil to lower the price we pay at the pump. So why can't we just do the same thing with housing? Let's go back for just a moment and look at the history of housing, affordable housing in America. In 1965, President Lyndon Johnson created the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, better known as HUD. This newly formed department of government was a key part of President Johnson's vision to use federal welfare programs such as HUD to combat poverty. Subsidies to build affordable housing were provided by HUD under the Johnson administration. However, construction was halted under the very next president, Richard Nixon. In the 1980s and 1990s, Presidents Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton allowed affordable housing to be built only when it was replacing existing units. The last 50 years have not been kind to the state of affordable housing in our nation, but there is something else that has been holding back the growth of affordable housing, and that is major point number 3, our tax code. Since 1913, our tax code has had an item called the mortgage interest deduction, or MID. MID allows homeowners to deduct interest payments on a mortgage from their federal income taxes. In 2020, the Congressional Joint Committee on Taxation projected that the MID would cost the federal government $30.2 billion in lost revenue. There are two things that are problematic with this. One is the fact that $30.2 billion is more money than the federal government spends on all housing assistance programs combined. Two, MID only benefits homeowners and not renters who are just trying to get by in the game of life. Also, keep in mind, the more expensive a home is, the more the owner can get in a tax refund. To review the concept of affordable housing, remember that one cannot make minimum wage and afford to rent an apartment in any counties in this country. Also note that history has not been kind to affordable housing, and our tax code benefits the homeowner over the renter. That story that you heard at the beginning of this speech, it was true. And it was my own. I hope that you have enjoyed listening to it. I also hope that the rest of my presentation persuaded you to become better informed about the affordable housing crisis. I would encourage you to join a local commission on affordable housing in your area, or at the very least start attending city council meetings and find out what your local civic leaders are doing to solve the affordable housing crisis.